That's one thing that stood out to me is how they use the musical cues to kind of tease us that certain things were happening and or
Yeah.
might not be happening. And definitely was a very, very good use of sound to kind of set the tone and establish, what may or may not be happening scene to
Oh,
scene.
and it
I
makes
really
you
enjoyed
and it
that.
makes you realize, like, how much score of a film is just it's the soul of the movie. It really is. Vicious was the same thing, and especially with this movie, it truly was the heart and soul of the film. In my opinion, was that music. And the gentleman who did the score for this film was actually nominated for a Canadian Screen Award, which is basically like the Canadian version of the Oscars over here in the Great White North. And it was well deserved. Like he got that nomination, and our team and our production was just so proud of the guy. And he really killed that score. It makes you like think, like, when you think about movies like that we grew up on, like Back to the Future and Jaws, like what would these movies be without the score? And it wouldn't be even half the movie without that music. And this is definitely one of those movies that it's elevated with that beautiful music. So I was so impressed with what he did with the music.
This is Luke Goss, and this is one of my favorite places to check out all things movie. Check it out. This is the QC.
Hey, this is Nick Smith. You're watching the QC, the best in entertainment, reviews, and more. This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.
Welcome back to the QC, presented by thequickcritic.com. I am very happy and excited to welcome back actor Nick Smith. Nick, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm excited to be here. Excited to talk with you again.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, Motherly dropped on Shudder just a few days ago. I
Yeah.
had the opportunity to watch it last night. Very taut 80 minutes. Really enjoyed it. Looking at my notes here, did a really great job of setting up the players, toying with expectations, and then, really paying it off at the end. And I think, the relationship between Laura Burke's character and her daughter, that's really the key component of the film. And they did a really good job of establishing that. And, without spoiling anything, goes in some very interesting directions over the course of the film. So,
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of twists. There's a lot of twists in this one.
yeah, for sure. Can you just give us some tidbits? What was it like filming the movie, and anything interesting going on set?
Well, so we're in the middle of nowhere filming this thing because a lot of it takes place on a farm, and so when you're watching the movie, it really does feel very isolated and in the middle of nowhere, and that's because it really was. We filmed outside of probably about 3.5 hours outside of Toronto. And it was like this beautiful little small town. The name is slipping me at the moment, but it's like this tiny little town that we filmed in, and this farm that we were on. And it was very, very in the middle of nowhere. It's exactly what it looks to be. Yeah. But it was a
Right
blast
on.
filming, that's for sure. It was so fun filming this thing.
One scene that really stood out to me was a standoff at the door between yourself, Laura Burke, and Colin Paradine's character. That
Yes.
that scene really, I remember thinking to myself, "Wow, this is crazy! Like, what's going to happen?" So, talk us through that scene. What was it like filming that?
Should I give a quick plot of like a quick synopsis of what this?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So
Sure.
Motherly is about a woman who is she's taking care of her child on this farm, and she's kind of she's hiding something. She's there for a reason. She's put there by the police to kind of protect her and she's there because of this bad accident this bad incident that happened. She's in like a protection, and so she's there kind of in a very kind of a low key life there with her daughter. And then people start knocking on her door. Basically, we come to this place, and it's me and my wife in the movie, and we're looking for some answers. Yeah, and it's a home invasion film. And things kind of get ugly from there, and some twists and turns happen from there. Yeah. But yeah, going back to that scene, it's funny you say that because that's my favorite scene in the movie too. It's like this really kind of intense um, scene in the movie that the tension is so high, and you feel like kind of all hell's gonna break loose at any second in that scene. I remember when we filmed that scene, and I should say like this scene is basically like the police officers at the door. No, I don't want to get too much spoilers, but the police officers at the door checking on her, and I have her kind of held captive, and I'm right behind the door, and I'm saying, what she should be saying to the police officer, and I have a gun to her, and it's just a very intense scene. That's my favorite scene of the movie.
Yeah, same. Definitely, definitely. I remember that stood out to me in that moment. I was like, well, just on edge because you don't know what's going to happen there, and this is a situation where that's really where things really hit the fan for her, for that character. So definitely
Yeah,
a scene,
yeah,
a memorable scene.
well, I was gonna say, like, I think a lot of that tension also came from like the incredible score behind this movie. Like the music in this movie is
Yes.
so well done, so beautiful, and it was all night shoots for the most part, at least for me anyway, and my character. And so I remember when we filmed that scene in particular, it must have been like I think it was like going on 5 a.m. We're fighting against daylight because I think like in an hour from that point, the sun's going to rise. But that was my memory from of shooting that. It was like in the middle of the night and it was a long day, and I think it kind of just naturally kind of went tense because it was a lot. It was just those night shoots can be challenging, yeah, but they can really add a lot of atmosphere in general.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned the sound design, and I definitely that's one thing that stood out to me is how they use the musical cues to kind of tease us that certain things were happening and or
Yeah.
might not be happening. And definitely it was a very very good use of sound to kind of set the tone and establish what may or may not be happening scene to
Oh,
scene.
and it
I
makes
really
you
enjoyed
it
that.
makes you realize like how much score of a film is just it's the soul of the movie. It really is. Vicious was the same thing, and especially with this movie, it truly was the heart and soul of the film. In my opinion, was that music. And the gentleman who did the score for this film was actually nominated for a Canadian Screen Award, which is basically like the Canadian version of the Oscars over here in the Great White North. And it was well deserved. Like he got that nomination, and our team and our production was just so proud of the guy. And he really killed that score. It makes you like think like when you think about movies like that we grew up on, like Back to the Future and Jaws, like what would these movies be without the score? And it wouldn't be even half the movie without that music. And this is definitely one of those movies that it's elevated with that beautiful music. So I was so impressed with what he did with the music.
Yeah, I was too, and as I said before, that really stood out to me is the different cues and how they really stuck those in there at different points and really just up the tension of the scene. So definitely great use of audio there. You know.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, I'm so glad you said like that. Your favorite scene was that door scene because I'm right there with you, man. I remember that even like even when you go off and you film these things, you really have no idea how they're going to end up looking or being. And then I remember the first time I saw the film as a whole, I saw that scene and I was like, oh man, this is one of the reasons why you want to be an actor in general. It's like to be a part of just a scene like that. It's just so. It's just so worth it. It's such a cool scene.
Yeah, yeah. So with Vicious and now Motherly, you're in the thriller, horror adjacent kind of genre. Is that
Yep.
something you're looking to stick with, or is something you could continue doing? Are you trying to stick with that element?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, like, like in being a Canadian actor, like, most of the stuff that gets filmed down here is a lot of genre stuff. It's a lot of horror stuff. So a lot of the stuff that I do is kind of horror based. Um, because it's like, I think like horror will always be seen, it's an easy sell when these producers are putting all this money into these projects. And so a lot of horror does get made. And I love horror. I'm a huge horror
Me
fan.
too. Me too.
I grew up on the 80s and 90s horror, and I'm a 90s kid. But grew up watching Scream and all the classic 80s stuff like Freddy and Michael and all that, as many
Definitely.
have. But so, I'm such a horror nerd. And so to be a part of, I just like making these, I like watching them. I like being in them. It's such an honor to do these horror films. So as long as people will keep putting me in them, I'm there. I just finished I did an episode of a TV series that Eli Roth is producing. So Eli Roth is
Awesome.
producing something. So Eli Roth is producing a TV series. It's an anthology horror series with Discovery Plus.
Okay.
So picture like Eli Roth's version of like Twilight Zone. Like every episode is a different story, and so I did the lead on one of those episodes, and God, it's some of the coolest stuff I've ever filmed. Like absolutely, like like the production, like the production on this thing was just so like magnificent. It was so incredible to to be a part of this thing. I can't wait till that comes out. So we shot that last month. Actually, it's very new.
Okay.
And So I grew up watching Cabin Fever. I'm a huge Eli Roth fan,
Me too.
and he was on set for a few days. As a producer, he's the main name on this thing. So he was on set like during the show, and so just being a part of a project where Eli Roth is the pusher behind it is that's really cool to me because like I grew up watching Cabin Fever. I'm a huge Cabin Fever fan, and also The Green Inferno and
Hostel as well, right? Was he
Hostel.
that? Yeah,
Hostel.
Hostel. Yeah.
He definitely did
Y-
the Hostel movies, but yeah, that's some intense stuff. The Hostel, yeah. But Green Inferno and Cabin Fever are always like my top favorites. But so to be able to start doing projects where like you're attached to stuff where there's people attached to it that like you grew up on is that's very surreal and incredible. So like speaking of horror, like that's one of the kings right there.
Right on. Yeah, no, I definitely that's great, and we're excited to see that project whenever that comes out. And going back to your point before about horror and how a lot of it gets made, I think it's
Yeah.
really great how with horror typically you don't have huge budgets. It really just comes down to having a good idea, and
Yeah.
for me, that's really what filmmaking comes down to, right? Is having good ideas, being a good writer, and being creative. And a lot of times, these small horror films, are able to find an audience and do really well. You know what I mean? I know two of the highest two of the most profitable films ever, as I understand it, are um, the original Blair Witch Project,
Yep.
and like the other one escapes me. But these are films that really just somebody had an idea and a camera, and the motivation and the wherewithal to figure it out, oftentimes without a lot of money, and finds an audience and goes from there. So
For
that's
sure.
the great thing about the horror genre.
Yeah, like, that tradition is, like, continuing to this day. I mean, you're thinking of Halloween. Were you thinking of Halloween?
Probably, yeah. It could be
Yeah,
Halloween, actually. Yeah,
because
yeah,
I mean, even going back to the late '70s where Carpenter did Halloween, I mean, that was a small budgeted thing when there was a small group of people, and that movie just, like, just blew up that genre, and it's an incredible film. But also, even go back in the late '90s with Blair Witch, and I'm a huge Blair Witch fan. That first movie was like a game changer, and it's that first movie is almost like it's like probably it's an inspiration even just for like horror filmmakers now where you can take like a small budget and it can blow up into this big huge thing where there's no names attached, but what's being celebrated is just the idea, the story, like you said. Yeah.
right. Yeah, and it
Yeah.
was actually I thought of it. It was Paranormal Activity. So those two
Ah,
films, I was reading an article recently where those two films basically, I believe, are the top, basically the most profitable films as far as they had micro budgets and were able to not only succeed but succeed, find an audience, but birth a franchise. I mean, how many Paranormal Activity films have they made? You know what I mean? They just keep
oh,
making them. So
absolutely
yeah.
perfect example. Like, I mean, and that's like a producer's dream is to like, just put a little bit in and make tons. But I think it was Blumhouse that did Paranormal Activity, wasn't it?
It probably is. I mean, Blumhouse is they're known for that type of film. You know what I mean? I think
Yeah.
they produced didn't they produce Get Out? I think they produced Get Out,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, Get Out
Yeah,
and they're doing the new Halloween movies, and I mean, Blumhouse is, they're just so incredible what they do. I mean, that's kind of like it's exactly what we're talking about, how like, like they take like this idea and it's not like this Michael Bay budget, but it's just mostly just based on like performance and idea, and then it just blow up. Yeah. And like, being a horror fan, like, this is my second movie that's gone on Shudder too, and like that's a huge thing for me too. Like, because I'm such a huge Shudder fan, and so for
great
these movies
platform.
yeah, like for these movies to go on Shudder, which just like grows your audience so much because that's where all the horror fans are, including myself.
Sure, sure, absolutely.
It's such a treat to have these movies go there.
Yeah. So, without getting into any spoilers for Motherly, I definitely felt there was a little bit of sequel bait at the end there. Like they kind of left it open for that. Do you think that's something that we might be able to see in the future? What do you think?
It's hard to say. I know the director Craig David Wallace, who is an incredible director down here in Canada, has done a lot of incredible TV down here and a lot of genre stuff too. I know that he has kicked around ideas. There might be a script in the works. Don't hold me to that, but I do know that he has an idea for our sequel to Motherly. I don't know if it'll get there, but I know that was something that was talked about. But yeah, I mean, my character's dead. I mean, that's a spoiler right there. I don't know if you want to put that in or not, but yeah, I don't know if, unless I was playing like my twin brother or something like that.
Well,
But
I don't know, man. We don't. You know how it goes with these things. We didn't see the body being. We didn't see you dying. We saw a situation that would indicate that you may have perished, but you never know. They could figure out a way to bring you back if they were doing a sequel. They could do it.
that's so true. I mean, when it comes to these horror movies, it's like, if you die in a horror movie, what does that? It doesn't really mean you're dead, especially when it comes to this it's that genre. Like in
Right.
horror movies, if you do maybe pass, are you really passing? I don't know. Especially if there's a
Yeah.
sequel.
Yeah. Right on. Cool. Well, again, really enjoyed the movie. Motherly, available now on Shudder, streaming now on Shudder. Everybody go check it out, watch it, come back and let me know what you thought about it. And Nick, really, really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you today and learn about what you're working on now, what you're working on in the future. And yeah, thank you.
Thanks for having me.